The recent controversy with Gal Gadot is a little hard to categorize. So I'm going to put this in its own section. So what's the essence of what's going on? Well, essentially Gal Gadot, and she's never hidden this, she's a very pro-Israeli person. She served in the military, which is mandatory. A lot of people say that's not stressed. You have to mandatorily serve in the Israeli army, but she's been very supportive of it in the past. So this is nothing new. But she put out a statement that was considered very controversial by a lot of people. And if you're not familiar with Middle East politics, you might think, well, it seemed like a very reasonable statement. It's just asking for peace for Israel and her neighbors, etc., etc. It seemed a very bland statement. So why did it kick off such a firestorm? Well, if you know the context, you understand sort of what she was implying. Now, maybe she was not implying anything. That's possible. But if you know the background, it, I think, did imply many things. By neighbors, she means Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, these nation states, but not necessarily Palestine. And again, it's kind of hard to confirm what a person is saying through their public speech, but there is slight confirmation because she also did this documentary series on supposedly strong, independent women. But if you look carefully, the people profiled never include Palestinian women. This has always been a major contradiction of people living in Israel that, on the one hand, they do recognize themselves as democracy. At the same time, they do recognize what they did was colonialism with the Palestinians. Now, the entire complex history of the Palestinians in Israel is way too much to just even summarize. I will just get through the bare outline, which is since the 1940s, it's generally agreed that Israel did conquer Palestine. However, there have been divisions even among Palestinians whether the Palestinians had national consciousness and then therefore were they conquering another separate community. But the Palestinians, far more than the Israelis, have been there for thousands of years. So the question becomes, even if Israel is sort of a modern creation as a nation state, does it have a right to exist? I myself actually take a stance which is seemingly much more extreme, but it's actually not to me. So most people favor kind of binationalism as the solution, namely the Palestinians and Israelis should live side by side. I myself do not agree. I think if we agree that basically the Israelis did, and there's really not disagreement here, that they did steal the land, they don't have any legitimate claim to it, so they should leave. If the Palestinians want to allow them as a binational state, that's fine, but I don't see any legal reason or even ethical reason why the Palestinians should not have full control of the land. But in terms of pragmatic politics, the Israelis just have so much economic, military, and political dominance, they really see no reason to ever give up any property at all. So the conflict over the last decades has always been allowing the Palestinians a certain amount of territory for them to be self-running and independent. But essentially, it's about Israel giving up land for peace. But again, do they have a right to it? Most people concede that it probably does not have a right to it, but again, the facts are it has the power to do whatever it wants. And where Gal Gadot fits in all this is that it's not just a matter of actual raw military force, but public opinion. And ironically, public opinion has steadily moved against Israel. I mean, in the 1990s and even the 2000s, the media was, for the most part, framing the debate positively towards the Israelis and against the Palestinians. There was recognition that the Palestinians were suffering, but the war on terror and things like that were used to frame the Israelis as sort of being at best, being at worst, just not complying with human rights as much as they should. But they basically saw their struggle as a just one. So steadily, public opinion has moved against them. And Gal Gadot is just sort of in a weird situation that she got the Wonder Woman role when she did, when, again, public opinion was much more open to the Palestinian side. It's still fairly pro-Israeli, but now there are just other voices being allowed in. Now, as to fears whether she's going to be canceled or fired, I don't support that. I think as a performer, you don't judge her by her politics, and I want to be consistent on that. So I don't support the firing of Gina Carano, and I don't support her being fired. But in the future, should she expect a lot of tough questions about Israel, even some protests or boycotts? Yes, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. I don't think she should be denied any job, but if she is going to take certain stances in public, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't be criticized. So it's going to be very interesting up ahead in terms of not Wonder Woman 84, which mostly she didn't do that many interviews for it because, again, there was a lot of constraints due to the crisis. But I think in the future, it'll be interesting to see how and how much she will be criticized for her stance. I would only agree probably with her in this, that if we are going to hold Israel to this tough stance, then other actors and actresses who are very nationalistic or pro-nationalistic then should also be scrutinized as well. But as far as I know, they are. I mean, there's not been much of a let-up on criticizing Mel Gibson for his stance and his controversies. So, again, the media could be more consistent. The fact that there was controversy over the statement itself, I don't think was bad. I myself would try to approach her more civilly, but again, the controversy is perfectly legitimate in that she seemed to exclude Palestine by intention. Maybe she did it unintentionally, but given what you know about Israeli politics, that they are aware that they are doing imperialism and they just try to find a lot of different ways of saying it. I don't think that was unintentional. I think that was very intentional to try to slip that thing through without acknowledging the Palestinians having their own nation. But that could be my misinterpretation. All right, this has been a short essay on the controversy of Gal Gadot and the language of politics regarding the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Thanks for listening.